Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for coming. AGC really is happy to be here. We want to thank our sponsors, Iron Street and Jules, for hanging out with us, and especially our speaker from Bryon. And it's my turn to introduce Mark. Mark Costa, the owner of AGC. Thanks for coming to it.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, everyone, for being here. It's an honor to be in front of you to talk about this important topic today. I've got just a couple of opening remarks, and we're going to go through this quickly to get on to our feature presentation. So, what we're going to talk about today is... no, thanks for Chris's cue, sorry. What we're going to talk about today is... we're going to talk about risk, and risk versus, what's the word? Risk versus, a lot of people say risk versus reward. That's true in a lot of cases. Today we're going to talk about risk versus ease. So when you think about the IT world, there's something that's very risky, very, very risky. It's very easy to do. There's something very hard to do, it's probably low risk. So think about our favorite thing in the world, MFA, multi-factor authentication. Like it's kind of medium difficulty, medium level of security. You can say turn MFA off. MFA off is very easy, but it's also very risky, very high risk. So you want to kind of balance what your organizations will tolerate for risk, what makes sense for risk, how to temper that risk with tooling to help you bring that risk down at an affordable price. So, oh yeah, there we go. Okay, so what kinds of risks do we need to think about, and where do we even start? I'd like to start at the bottom of the stack here. First of all, what's required by law? What's the absolute mandate you must have that will keep your risks at a minimum? This type of data includes PII, personally identifiable information, names, addresses, phone numbers, things like that. Things that are like sort of text in a resume, keep that private. Those are under the new care law in Minnesota. So those are mandated to keep those private and secret. You have to have that no matter what. Up from there, there's mandated by compliance. So if you have HIPAA, PCI, you have any of those kind of compliance-based standards you have to follow. That's pretty important to do that. You don't want to get caught not doing that. Above that, what's required for cyber risk insurance? Cyber risk insurance helps. On the application, they ask you a bunch of questions. Do you have a spam filter? Do you do backup? Do you test this, that? A whole bunch of questions on there. They do that, and those are best practices. So if you do those things, you're lowering your risk. Does it make it easier? Not necessarily. It lowers the risk, and in theory, lowers the cost of it. Overall, you want to be a good steward of the data. Keep that data safe for yourself, for your employees, for your customers, for your vendors. Be a good steward of that data. That's the overall message for risk. How do I lower that? Being a good steward of data. And generally, what's your risk tolerance for the organization? How much risk are you willing to take on? So if you think of an auto loan, if you have bad credit, you're high risk, which means your propensity to pay back the loan is less. You have a high interest rate, right? That's the payment you pay for that. Think of a collection agency. They probably don't have great credit. Those folks pay high fees because they're high risk. So those are high risk kind of agencies for financial data. For data, you probably don't want to be high risk for data. Some companies choose to not make backups. That's high risk. Some people choose to not protect data in a secret place. That's high risk. And there's consequences if things fall apart. So, next. We believe that there's not a single thing, not one thing that you can do. That's the most common question we get. Every person that works for us, what's the one thing that I can do to keep us safe? There isn't one. There is not a single one. There's a bunch of things. So we like to use a layered cake approach. It shows kind of the stacks that are in there. I would say if you do some of these, good, lowers the risk. If you do all of them, that's great. Is there a foolproof plan always? There is not. There's always something that can happen, and the number one thing is usually at the top of the cake. The cake topper is you, the employees. So that's where education, things like this that come about, because we want to make sure we're good about being good stewards of data. Having the tools is great. Again, not any one of those are going to save today. They help lower risk, but they don't protect you completely. So that is my backdrop, that's my opening remarks. And now, on to our feature presentation. So give that as a backdrop, and now please welcome Patrick. Woo!
Thank you very much. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
All right, excellent. So my name is Curtin. I work for Field Effect. We're a cybersecurity company. We operate globally, but mostly in the United States and Canada. I've been working in tech for about 30 years. I'm an engineer by trade, electrical engineer, but I've been always I started in networking, and about 20 years ago, that's one entry point into cybersecurity. So I've been coming up on almost exactly 20 years in cybersecurity. As I've mentioned to a few of you already, I'm still learning new stuff every day. It's constantly changing. You can never be fully on top of it in terms of knowing everything, but my company is full of experts that do that all the time. So what we're going to do today is talk about cybersecurity, but with a little bit of a bent towards the financial aspects. But we are going to talk about some cybersecurity basics as well. The way we're going to do this, we're going to start by talking about cyber criminals versus society. It's a scourge right now. We'll look at what some of the costs of breaches are, and I'm going to be asking you some questions about that. We'll look at what it takes to fight back, and it's a combination of people, process, and technology. Like Mark said, it's no single thing. And finally, we'll talk about the ROI, and the ROI is not purely financial at all. Okay, so just to get everyone on the same sheet of paper, what happens in a ransomware event? Part of the reason cybersecurity is so difficult is because there's a million ways for people to get into your IT, right? It really is brutal, just all the different techniques that can be used. We see legacy techniques, things that were working 20 years ago, still working, and we also see new things coming out every day, all right? Once a threat actor gets in, though, what they do is a fairly common playbook. They get into your network, they don't know anything about it, okay, and their initial foothold is weak. So the first thing they want to do normally is establish persistence, so that they've got their claws into a system, one system. They don't know anything about the network, so they're going to do reconnaissance, okay? They're going to scan the network. They're going to escalate privilege, so that they get more power on that system. They want to become an administrator. Then they're going to want to move around. They're going to hop onto other systems. It's called traversing the network. And they're going to try and get on as much as they can. All the servers, all the backups, get into everything that they can. Then they're going to start harvesting information. They're going to be looking for data. They're going to be building file archives, and they're going to be exfiltrating it. They're going to be sending it out somewhere else that it isn't supposed to be. Once they've done that...
Check that again. Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for coming. AGC really is happy to be here. We want to thank our sponsors, Iron Street and Jules, for hanging out with us, and especially our speaker from Bryon. And my turn to introduce Mark Costa, the owner of AGC. Thanks for coming to it.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, everyone, for being here. It's an honor to be in front of you to talk about this important topic today. I've got just a couple of opening remarks, and we're going to go through this quickly as we get on to our feature presentation. So, what we're going to talk about today is... no, thanks for Chris's cue, sorry. What we're going to talk about today is... we're going to talk about risk, and risk versus, what's the word? Risk versus, a lot of people say risk versus reward. That's true in a lot of cases. Today we're going to talk about risk versus ease. So when you think about the IT world, there's something that's very risky, very, very risky. It's very easy to do. There's something that's very hard to do, it's probably low risk. So think about our favorite thing in the world, MFA, multi-factor authentication. Like it's kind of medium difficulty and a medium level of security. You can say turn MFA off. MFA off is very easy, but it's also very risky, very high risk. So you want to kind of balance what your organizations will tolerate for risk, what makes sense for risk, how to temper that risk with tooling to help you bring that risk down at an important place. So, oh yeah, okay. So, what kinds of risks do we need to think about, and where do we even start? Let's start at the bottom of the stack here. First of all, what's required by law? What's the absolute mandate you must have that'll keep your risks at a minimum? This type of data includes PII, personally identifiable information, names, addresses, phone numbers, things like that. Things that are like sort of tends in a resume, you keep that private. Those are under the new care law in Minnesota. So those are mandated. You keep those private and secret. You have to do that no matter what. Up from there, there's mandated by compliance. So if you have HIPAA, PCI, you have any of those kind of compliance-based standards you have to follow. That's pretty important to do that. You don't want to get caught not doing that. Above that, what's required for cyber risk insurance? Cyber risk insurance helps. On the application, they ask you a bunch of questions. Do you have a spam filter? Do you do backups? Do you test this, that? A whole bunch of questions on there. They do that, and those are best practices. So again, if you do those things, you're lowering your risk. Does it make it easier? Not necessarily. It lowers the risk, and in theory, lowers the cost. Overall, you want to be a good steward of the data. Keep that data safe for yourself, for your employees, for your customers, for your vendors. Be a good steward of data. That's the overall message for risk. How do I lower that? Being a good steward of data. And generally, what's your risk tolerance for the organization? How much risk are you willing to take on? So if you think of an auto loan, if you have bad credit, you're high risk, which means your propensity to pay back the loan is less. You have high interest rate, right? That's the payment you pay for that. Think of a collection agency. They probably don't have great credit. Those folks pay high fees because they're high risk. So those are high risk kind of agencies for financial data. For data, you probably don't want to be high risk for data. Some companies choose to not make backups. That's high risk. Some people choose to not protect data with secret place. That's high risk. And there's consequences if things fall apart. So, right next. We believe that there's not a single thing, not one thing that you can do. That's the most common question we get. Every person that works for us, what's the one thing that I can do to keep us safe? There isn't one. There is not a single one. There's a bunch of things. So we like to use a layered cake approach. It shows kind of the stacks that are in there. I would say if you do some of these, good, that lowers the risk. If you do all of them, that's great. Is there a foolproof plan always? There is not. There's always something that can happen. And the number one thing is usually at the top of the cake. The cake topper is you, the employees. So that's where education, things like this that come about, because we want to make sure we're good about being good stewards of data. Having the tools is great. Again, not any one of those are going to save the day. They help. They help lower risk, but they don't protect you completely. So that is my backdrop. That's my opening remarks. And now, on to our feature presentations. So we're going to bring Patrick up. We're going to spot the laptop here in just a second. So a little change of gear. Hold the applause. So I'm just going to give a bit of background. So Field Effect we found as a vendor partner in the event that Chris and I went to about a year and a half ago. We were looking for a solution that did a bunch of those layers of the cake. So as a provider, I don't want to have 5 or 6 or 7, 8 different tools. That means 5 or 6 or 7 different logins, setups, every time you onboard a customer, more and more and more to onboard. We're looking for a solution provider that did kind of best of breed protection, lots of those layers of the cake without a lot of effort. To Field Effect fit that perfectly. So they've got a lot of our technical requirements, but also from a staffing and how to get this up to speed, helps us onboard clients faster, get the protection we really need and customers want to lower their risk. So we'll give that as a backdrop, and now please welcome Patrick.
Woo! Thank you very much. Everyone hear me? Yes. All right, excellent. So my name is Pat Curtin. I work for Field Effect. We're a cybersecurity company. We operate globally, but mostly in the United States and Canada. I've been working in tech for about 30 years. I'm an engineer by trade, electrical engineer, but I've been always I started in networking, and about 20 years ago, that's one entry point into cybersecurity. So I've been coming up on almost exactly 20 years in cybersecurity. As I've mentioned to a few of you already, I'm still learning new stuff every day. It's constantly changing. You can never be fully on top of it in terms of knowing everything, but my company is full of experts that do that all the time. So what we're going to do today is talk about cybersecurity, but with a little bit of a bent towards the financial aspects. But we are going to talk about some cybersecurity basics as well. The way we're going to do this, we're going to start by talking about cyber criminals versus society. It's a scourge right now. We'll look at what some of the costs of breaches are, and I'm going to be asking you some questions about that. We'll look at what it takes to fight back, and it's a combination of people, process, and technology. Like Mark said, it's no single thing. And finally, we'll talk about the ROI, and the ROI is not purely financial at all. Okay, so just to get everyone on the same sheet of paper, what happens in a ransomware event? Part of the reason cybersecurity is so difficult is because there's a million ways for people to get into your IT, right? It really is brutal, just all the different techniques that can be used. We see legacy techniques, things that were working 20 years ago, still working, and we also see new things coming out every day, all right? Once a threat actor gets in, though, what they do is a fairly common playbook. They get into your network, they don't know anything about it, okay, and their initial foothold is weak. So the first thing they want to do normally is establish persistence, so that they've got their claws into a system, one system. They don't know anything about the network, so they're going to do reconnaissance, okay? They're going to scan the network. They're going to escalate privilege so that they get more power on that system. They want to become an administrator. Then they're going to want to move around. They're going to hop onto other systems. It's called traversing the network. And they're going to try and get on as much as they can. All the servers, all the backups, get into everything they can. Then they're going to start harvesting information. They're going to be looking for data. They're going to be building file archives, and they're going to be exfiltrating it. They're going to be sending it out somewhere else that it isn't supposed to be. Once they've done that, the last step is to encrypt. And that leads to what's called double extortion. Okay, they've got two things that they're going to present to you. They're going to say, we've encrypted your system, your systems. They might have skull and crossbones or a nasty kind of message out saying, we own you. And by the way, we've stolen your data and we're going to leak it if you don't pay the ransom. Right? So they have leverage on you through your data, and they've also crippled you operationally. Right? That is typically what happens in a ransomware event. All right, what are the costs of a breach? Find yourself in this situation, what are some of the costs? So we're going to go through this, but I want to open the floor here. I'd like a few people to suggest what some of the costs are. And Mark out here, but anyone want to venture a suggestion about one of the costs?
Reputation.
Reputation is huge. People tend to think about the dollars, but reputation is massive, especially when it's client data being leaked. Okay, very good. Anyone else?
Staff time.
Downtime.
Staff time.
Staff time. Staff time, yes. So there's a few different aspects of staff time, right? First of all, you're not able to do your work, but you're paying your people. And second of all, your IT people are going to be run off their feet trying to recover. Plus, you're probably bringing in outside help because you may not have the expertise to do it yourselves. Okay, any other costs?
You might have to pay for lawyers.
Yes, lawyers, crisis, you might, a bigger company might bring in a communications person, but the lawyers get involved and then they want to tell you exactly what to do too. So you lose control because the lawyer's going to say, here's what you're doing. Good one. Anyone else? Okay, we're going to see a bunch of them. There are more. One I'll throw out is credit monitoring. So who got a letter from Ticketmaster or an email from Ticketmaster? I did. So Ticketmaster got hacked last year, and one of the things they did was offer credit monitoring, 2 years of credit monitoring for free for everyone impacted, which is like tens of millions of people. That costs them a lot of money. Okay. It's not free for them. All right, let's look at some examples here. So this is a fun one. What do these companies have in common? Right, NVIDIA, huge in the news these days, right? They're neck and neck with Apple as the most valuable company in the world. Samsung, huge. Microsoft, huge. We've got some telecoms, we've got some gaming companies. So every single company up here, at least $1 billion in revenue and at least 1,000 employees. But if you're talking about Samsung and Microsoft, you're over 200,000 employees, hundreds of billions of revenue. These are all huge companies. Well, in 2023, they were all hacked by the same cybercrime gang. Okay? Now, I use the term gang a little loosely because it was a group of kids, actual minors, okay, under 18, doing it for fun. These are all well-defended companies. They got hacked by children. All right, let's look at the city of Dallas. So they got hacked in May of 2023. They put a report out at the end of 2023. They got hacked pretty bad. And when you hack a city, it's not just you can't pay, for your dog license. It's, in this case, it affected 911. It affected a lot of stuff. They lost 1.1 terabytes of data. They spent $8.5 million US on recovery. Now that is purely external costs. That doesn't count the 40,000 hours of staff time that was spent on the cleanup. The cyber criminals were in the network for 6 weeks. We call that dwell time. And the report is a little bit self-congratulatory, but the only way that they found out about this was when their systems got encrypted. They weren't found, they weren't discovered. Okay? It was when the cyber criminals pressed, go, that Dallas found out they had a problem. Again, well defended now. This one hit the news pretty big. Both Caesars and MGM got hacked in 2023, again by younger people doing social engineering. Caesars took one route. They paid the ransom. They paid tens of millions of dollars. MGM did not. MGM was basically inoperative for a couple of weeks. I mean, they didn't completely shut down, but it made it, they wrecked weddings. They had to shut down some of their operations for a couple of weeks. The thing about MGM is they should have known better. They were hacked in 2020. And at the time, the CEO came up and said, this isn't going to happen. Well, and it happened. There were so many opportunities for detection and prevention, and they suffered a big, big cost. And on top of it, we see very recently, this is just in January this year, that they settled a lawsuit. So that's another cost. Lawsuits. They had to settle for $45 million. All right, let's go a little closer to home here. Minneapolis Public Schools. They got hacked in September 2023. Over 100,000 records lost. There were demands about ransom that, as far as I know, were not paid. The school board looked at. They were slow to notify. There was a lot of public frustration over this. There was a lack of information. One of the things they did here was offer credit protection. But, there was some very sensitive information lost in there. There was disciplinary stuff. There was health information, grades, all kinds of things that, for the parents in the audience, hopefully no one was part of this, but I have kids, and I would have been very upset if this had happened with my kids. Minnesota radiology practice lost an unbelievable amount of information here, over 500,000 medical records. This one, June of last year. And then Minnesota Human Services compromised personal information of 4,000 people. They're not as big, but the point I'm making here is, like, everywhere I go, I can find local stories. Now, it's easy to sit back and say, oh, these are big organizations. They're not going after, small and medium businesses. The reality is the cyber criminals are opportunistic, and they are going after everything, absolutely everything that they're going around the internet parking lot and looking for unlocked doors. That's it, right? And smaller organizations, you don't hear about them because, it's just not going to make the news. Now, we do have an organization here today. This is really unusual, that is going to share the panel with me later. So you get to hear firsthand from some of your colleagues about what the experience is like. I do have one last example here because it's kind of worst case. This is Clark County in Nevada, 5th largest school district in the United States. The attack took place over months, went in through their email servers. They were not detected. until the encryption happened. In this case, 200,000 students impacted. Everything they had was lost or leaked, okay? And the kicker is, I'll use this as the last example, because the unusual thing is the cyber criminals, their first step wasn't to notify the board. They started emailing parents. You have your kids' stuff, okay? So the level of embarrassment, the level of just emotion triggered by that, even higher. And what happens when a story like this comes out? Well, people start digging. First of all, turns out the tech chief at the school district went on vacation during this. That doesn't look good. Parents sued the board. The board tried to get the lawsuit thrown out. The judge said, no, you're not throwing it out. So, you're in a very, unfortunately in this case, a very antagonistic relationship with the school board's clients. So again, it's public sector, it's private sector, it's everyone. Now, let's talk about some of the costs. This is based on a couple of papers, one from IBM, one from TELUS. Mean time to recover from a breach, 2/3 of a year. Average cost to investigate, $1.6 million. Average cost of post-breach activity, $1.4. There's other costs. They're talking about an average cost of about $5 million. Now, that's for larger organizations, okay? Smaller organization isn't going to incur that kind of a cost, but it can still be prohibitive. TELUS's survey says of the Canadian organizations that paid a ransom, only half got their data back. So there's all kinds of reasons why, even if you paid a ransom, why it won't work. The key might not work. The criminals may not honor the agreement. And it's just tech, things go wrong. You've got no help desk for this, right? And this is really telling, 2/3 of the victims are attacked again within the next year. So it's very similar to cars. The car gets stolen off the driveway. So the criminals will often go back to see what kind of car is brought in and maybe one still out. All right, we saw some of these already, but common assumptions are, I have backups in place. Hey, backups are super important. A certain kind of backup. But backups are super important, but they're for your recovery. Right? Now, we do see organizations basically having to go bankrupt because they don't have backups. They get hacked, they got nothing to rebuild with, and they're done. So backups are important, but they're only part of the solution. I have antivirus and firewall unprotected. Well, even 20 years ago when I started, that wasn't sufficient. We still needed intrusion detection and other things. I have cyber insurance, I'm good. All right, let's talk about cyber insurance for a second. First of all, it's harder to get these days. It's only going to pay out on certain things. It's not going to pay out on lost revenue, typically. They're only going to pay out if you are doing what you said you were going to do. So cyber insurers in the beginning were not very careful, but they learned. And to get a policy today, you have to commit to doing certain things. You're filling out checkboxes. And if you're not doing what you said you're going to do, you're not going to honor the insurance. Okay, I'll be able to tell if something is wrong right away. Unfortunately not true. We've got countless examples of the cyber criminals being on networks for months, on well-defended networks for months, and there being no signs of it. Finally, someone's going to manage this internally. The question is who? Right? Who's going to manage it? It's hard to find good cybersecurity help these days. It's hard to find good IT help, right? So you got to ask yourself, who's going to deal with this when the time comes? All right, now, I've been kind of doom and gloom up until now, right? And I don't want to be, because the point is you want to become resilient. You want to be able to take a punch. Cybercrime is part of life today, just like normal crime is. With normal crime, you take precautions, just the same thing with cybercrime. There are precautions you can take, there's help you can get. The whole idea is to get into a place where you can take a punch. So I'm not saying the goal is zero compromises. That is not realistic. Okay? There's all kinds of reasons why a organization will get breached, even when it's well defended. Okay? There's always gaps. The thing is, what happens from there? What you want to have is a situation where if an employee makes a mistake, like clicks on something they shouldn't click on, it becomes a bad day for them, but not a bad day for the whole organization. And it's very achievable. Now, the examples, again, were very big organizations. Those are actually way harder to secure than your organizations, okay? Your organizations actually can be secured far, far more easily. Now, what it's going to take is a combination of people, process, and technology. There is no one thing. I mean, I could give you a list of things that are really good to do that will reduce risk a lot. Like, you got to patch your systems, right? That's probably number one. That will help you against legacy things. It won't help you against all kinds of new things we're seeing today. It's a combination of these three things. So let's go into this a bit. All right, people. Let's start with employees and leaders. We tend to focus on employees, right? And employees are our weak link. This is not the right way to look at it. With a little bit of training, your employees become your first line of defense, right? They do need training. They do need awareness of what the threats are in their organizations that do that. You do need to give them tools that allow them, for example, to check an email to see if it's bad or not. But they're a really, really important part. They are an important part of this solution. Leaders really need to understand as well. Okay, so leadership has been, I'd say, overall in large organizations where you see these breaches, they have not been doing their due diligence in terms of making sure their organizations have in place what they need. You want to try and create a cybersecurity culture too. So be aware of the risks, and when something goes wrong, just like with physical security, see something, say something. We've got our physical security colleague over here. Same idea with cybersecurity. You want people to report problems and not hide them. You don't want them to be afraid of reporting stuff. Seeking out third-party expertise. Unfortunately, it is just hard to find cybersecurity resources today. It's hard, it's expensive, retention is hard. So a new model is out there for you to get that through companies like AGC, okay? Where, if you can't find the people, you obtain the skills that way. And you can also get third parties in to audit, how are we doing? You can get them into new exercises. This is more for large organizations, but you can do phishing exercises, you can do tabletop exercises, what will we do in an incident? And all of that stuff are valid ways to go. Now, process. This is where people's eyes glaze over, but it's super important. I'll give you a few concrete examples of really important process things to do. Okay, offboarding. When an employee leaves the organization or is made to leave, what happens to their accesses? Sometimes this gets forgotten, right? You need to disable accounts when people leave. You need to decommission systems when they're no longer doing something useful. You have to review privilege. So, in my company, I've got a very low level of privilege because I'm not doing the work that needs to have administrator access. But we still see organizations where everyone has administrative privileges, so they can install software to their heart's content. Yeah, really convenient, really easy for them, but really, really insecure. Mitigation of technical risks. Do you have a vulnerability management program? Which means, do you patch your systems, and do you check that you've patched your systems? Really incredibly important. Documenting, also important, super boring, but when you have some kind of an incident, documentation really matters to the engineers, right? So they can see what you've done. And so you can understand what kind of residual risk you have. There may be systems that you have that can't actually tolerate having protections on them. Well, important to know about them, but actually protections in place. Finally, technology. I could put the best cybersecurity person in an organization, and single-handed, they will not be able to protect your organization. You still need technology. It's that marriage of all these things. So some of the things that you want: 24/7 risk management and monitoring. Okay, I'll break that down into 3 parts. 24/7. Threat actors do tend to operate in the middle of the night for us, which just happens to be not the middle of the night in places like Eastern Europe and Russia. Okay, not a coincidence. But they do want to come at us when we are, not at full strength, when people are not at work. So weekends, middle of the night is a very common time for an attack to take place, for these for activity to take place. Risk management. So we're going to be proactive. We want to be looking for the vulnerabilities in our networks so that we can do something about them before the threat actor does, before the cyber criminals do. Okay? That is an evergreen activity that never stops. And then monitoring, which is watching for bad things happening. That has to be 24/7. So you want to detect as early as possible. And detection is great, but automated blocking is even better. So there are solutions that will do that, that will automatically block bad things from happening. Antivirus will do that for very, very low-grade malware, but a more sophisticated solution will do that for more sophisticated attacks. You want integration with cloud solutions. It's all about the cloud these days. Cloud is funny. We thought cloud would solve everything. But really what you're doing is you're taking data from your own network and putting it onto someone else's network, right? So you need to have monitoring of that in place. You hear a lot about AI. We might talk about this a bit later in the Q&A or something, but AI and machine learning, you do want to take advantage of in your solution because, I'll give you an example. One of the most common ways that cyber criminals are coming at us today is using our own credentials. So they're going to trick us into coughing up our credentials. Phishing is more about that these days than about dropping malware on you. So they're going to trick you into giving up your password, and then they're going to log in using your password. So there's some indicators of why that would be wrong, and it should be detectable. The problem is that you're looking at tons and tons and tons of data. And with some of the more sophisticated approaches, what you're really looking for, like everything I described about what a threat actor does, it's all detectable. There's breadcrumbs on all of that. The problem is you're looking for the needle in a haystack, in a field of haystack, in a country full of fields. It's that bad. So leveraging AI and machine learning in a solution will allow you to detect those more sophisticated attacks. And finally, there's basic architectural things. Now, in a really small, for a very small business, this first one doesn't apply, network segmentation, but for a lot of businesses it does. You want to have your users separated from your services and so on, so that when a cyber criminal gets in, it's hard for them to move around. MFA was already mentioned, multi-factor authentication, super important. So that's one of those things you do to prevent cyber criminals from getting in with your legitimate credentials. If you're using MFA, you've got a good defeat in place. Now, not all MFA is created equal. My bank still uses SMS-based MFA, so if I log in, I'll get an SMS code. Okay, that's better than nothing, but it's not very good. SMS MFA can be bypassed. So what you want is something more like Microsoft Authenticator or the Authenticator from Google, or there's also hardware tokens you can use. Extremely hard to bypass. And backups. So again, not all backups are created equal. And cyber criminals will go after your backups. So what do you need? You need offline, immutable backups. You need backups that regularly get taken off and are physically separated so that the cyber criminal cannot get at you. So now we'll just talk a little bit about what we offer through AGC, Field Effect MDR. We cover your networks really through 3 sets. Put in place tools that help you qualify for cyber insurance, and it all adheres to industry standard frameworks, right? Which the insurers will understand, and it's all in a very well codified package. And it is layered. So the graphic that Mark used at the beginning is bang on. You need defense in depth. To get that resilience, you need defense in depth. And the way you get it is through these things I've already mentioned. 24/7 monitoring and detection. What we call, in a large organization, this is done through a SOC, a Security Operations Center. When you can access a SOC, you can benefit from being protected by a SOC through a service like this. You also get that vulnerability management that will show you what is out of date and what's vulnerable. So something can be done about it before the threat actor goes after it. You get threat intelligence. So basically, our solution brings in feeds from all over the security industry so that we're aware of the latest indicators of compromise, and that's all put across our fleet of defended clients. We've got a DNS firewall so we can protect against malicious communications with known bad domains. Here's the bottom line. It's a holistic approach. We bring in all kinds of data on the left, okay? Synthesize it, run it through a suite of analytics, backed by some of the best cybersecurity analysts on the planet, and we give you a very clean feed of information. So for a typical organization, we'll only be telling you a few things a week. And we'll tell it to you in a triage manner. It could be urgent, it could be of moderate importance, or it might just be suspicious, something for you to check when you have the time. So it's really that nice, clean way of taking billions of security events and bringing them down through a funnel to something much, much more manageable. And that is honestly the problem with most of the industry today, is extremely complicated tools that are expensive and noisy. Okay? And we don't believe that's right, not for you folks. So, what's the ROI here? Well, we've talked about the financial ROI. There's all kinds of costs you incur in a breach. The dollar costs alone that you incur in a breach are significantly more, orders of magnitude more, than the cost of having decent cybersecurity. Now, reputation, you can't put a cost on it. There's no dollar figure there. It can make or break. Now, in the case of the school board's got a bit of a monopoly. They're going to continue, they've burned a lot of goodwill, but they're still going to be doing what they're doing with changes, I imagine. But for small and medium businesses, it could be existential, right? If their client data is gone, and even losing your employee data isn't good. You don't want to alienate your workforce by losing their data. Okay, lower left, operational continuity. This is probably the one that matters the most. If you're a business and you get locked up, you're going to have to scramble to be able to continue to sell. So 15,000 car dealerships got nailed a couple of years ago, and they had to scramble to real old school car sales, right? Because all of their systems were gone, and some did better than most. The ones that had planned in advance of it did much better. And then for, it's not just organizations that are out to sell, it's organizations who are delivering mandates. So, your public sector organizations, your NGOs, your charitable organizations, they can't do what they're doing without their IT. And that's, unfortunately, the reality today is everything's running on IT, right? So if your IT is gone, you can't do what you're there to do. So this is the part that really, really hurts organizations the most, because yes, they're suffering reputational damage. Yes, there's financial damage, but for a period of time, and that period of time can be quite long if you're not ready for it. You're not able to do your mission, you're not able to do what you're there to do. Put all that together, the biggest ROI of having a good cybersecurity solution is getting that peace of mind, knowing that this is not going to happen. So, FieldTech has never had an organization that was fully protected get ransomware. Now, when an organization hasn't fully deployed us, every single system that doesn't have protection becomes a vulnerability. Now, we all the time have organizations that have one or two that aren't defended, and what you want is if a criminal gets on that, then you can't move around. You can quickly squash them and alert it to it, and the problem's taken care of. Right? So, peace of mind is the biggest takeaway. It is scary out there, but it is not hopeless at all. So, I'm happy to take questions, but we're also going to do a panel, so I don't know what we're going to do here. We're going to take questions now, or...
Can you take it off a little bit afterward?
I'm sorry.
Okay. Let's take a 5-minute break here for now. Let's give them- let's give them Patrick. We'll take a 5-minute break. You want to refill food or beverages or bathroom break. We'll reconvene in just about 5 minutes. Local ransomware event that took place October 5th, for those of us keeping track. I remember distinctly. So I remember the date because my life was interrupted briefly. I planned to have a barbecue that day, and I woke up extra early to the buzzing of my phone. So I will, first of all, let's introduce the team up here so we know who they are and what they are. So name and role and favorite sport, how about that? Or some other fun facts.
Okay, all right. Thanks for making me go first. Karen Schmidt, I'm the HR leader at Dubow, and I would have to say golf is my favorite sport.
Hi, my name is Jenna Kraemer, and I am Sales and Business Development at Dubow. And gosh, I have so many favorite sports. My kids are in so many. So I love going to the BMX track, and I love watching my youngest dance.
I'm Bryon Kraemer, run the operations there at Dubow. So if you guess by the last name, I also have 2 very active kids. BMX and dance is our life.
All right, so let's kick things off. So let's think back to the very beginning. What was a typical week like at Dubow Textile just before the event? What happened during the course? What was your day-to-day like?
Yeah, so our day-to-day is before the ransom attack, we had about 200 employees that would come into the office every single day and running 2 full shifts, 18-hour work day. We would receive in between 3,000 to 4,000 orders, producing upwards of about 15,000 pieces on a daily basis. So our day-to-day was we all work from in-office, so it's every single day, 7 a.m. We all walk in and make sure our staff are set up on our production side, and we start taking orders, talking to customers, and communicating what that day or that week looks like.
Could you describe the types of products and services you offer so people know?
Absolutely. So we are a contract decorator, so we decorate primarily apparel in the promotional product industry. So we do embroidery, we screen print, we digital print, we dye sub, we laser etch. We do pretty much anything you possibly can think of on apparel. And we also do some hard goods in-house. So printing on barware, we print on ceramic mugs, tumblers, everything else really in that knick-knack kind of world we are able to print on.
Thank you. Can you describe the event from the beginning? So, ground zero on October 5th, Saturday morning.
Yeah.
Who was involved? Kind of what was the first couple of steps? Just kind of initial reaction. Go from there.
Yeah, so we actually sat down before we came here to kind of re-talk about what happened that day, because not gonna lie, we want to forget it. But the beginning of 5 a.m. that morning, Field Effect contacted Mark, letting him know that something didn't look right into our system. Immediately, Mark notified Bryon and Karen, correct? And Bryon and Karen were notified saying something happened. It does not look good. At that point in time, Karen immediately contacted our insurance to say where are we at, what happens, what do we do? And I will say that threw everybody into what's next. The insurance immediately grabbed onto us, the 3 of us. They grabbed onto Mark. They contacted legal, and they contacted our cyber forensic team, SRM. And we were on a call within an hour with everybody, figuring out what is next. Immediately when we were on the call, the cyber team instructed Mark, which we were very grateful for because none of us would have known what to do, but to drive to the office and open up the computer, open up the ransom, and there was the ransom note. It was very clear that it was a professional ransom note and signed by the threat actor team that was taking over our system. At that point, we really followed the instructions between the cyber team and our legal and the insurance on what to do. But internally, this happened on a Saturday morning, and we went into an effect of saying, okay, we all need to meet in person, in office, and figure out what this means for us for Monday and for our staff. So when we got in on Saturday, we were still having conversations with the rest of the team. I'm going to call them our cyber team. And from there, it was also not only the discussions with the cyber team, but the discussions internally on how do we take care of our staff and how do we let our customers know. Because at that point in time, we could not get into anything. And our business is ran 100% by technology. It was actually very, very scary. So that day we started where we said, okay, tomorrow morning we're all coming, and we actually brought in our management team on Sunday. So we texted the management team and we said, can everybody come to the office? We know it's Sunday, and I'm so grateful for our team. Every single one of them showed up that day, and we told them what was going on. And of course, when something like this happens, you don't know the long term, you don't know if it's short term, you don't know if it's gonna be fixed tomorrow or for us as in a few weeks. And so it was the management team and literally putting everybody on deck of what we wanted them to focus on, including Karen and the HR, and putting together the plan of how to communicate with the staff, the rest of the staff, to Bryon looking at the operations side and saying, okay, what orders do we have in-house, what's sitting here, what can we still possibly even get out? If it's produced, can it go to a shipping station? Then to myself, looking at our customers and what do our customers need to know, and how do we do that? The benefit we had at that point is legal was really involved in what those communications could look like. So we would write them. So we wrote our first one on Sunday. We sent it to legal and to insurance to approve. And then they sent it back to us, giving us what we can say, what we can't say, and how we should say it. So everything we did from that point till the end had to go through legal and insurance to approve prior to us sending out any sort of communication to anybody.
Great, thank you for that. Can you talk about the communication style that you use or the types of communication you use? So obviously internal email was down, so you had to do new email accounts or new one-offs for that. And then what types of communication are you referring to say legal has this communication? What were you sending out to the threat actor?
So,
to the threat actor, okay, both.
So, well, we didn't have a lot of say actually in what we wanted to say to the threat actor. So that was one thing that surprised us, is that we would start the conversation very much with intent of saying, we need our business back, we must settle, so whatever they want, let's give them. But we very much were directed by legal and the negotiation experts on how we could negotiate with them, because if we acted too quickly, they might think that we had more funds available than we actually did. So that was actually a much longer process than we were expecting it to be, and we had less control over that than we wanted at the time. But understanding the big picture, that the people working on our side were experts who had worked with contractors before, and this was our first time and only time. So we kind of just went with what they directed us to do, voicing our opinions and our thoughts, wanting to resolve this as quickly as possible. but we were definitely at the hands of our experts to guide us through the process, and it took a long time to negotiate. Oh, the time delay was terrible because we would respond wanting them to respond to us instantly, and it could be 5 hours, 12 hours, 24 hours. We would just keep waiting and waiting and waiting, and I know some of us got up in the middle of the night to see if they had responded yet, because this was not just crippling to us, it was paralyzing to our business, and we wanted it over as soon as possible. But we had to wait for their response, and they took their time. They were not in a hurry to respond to us. They were fine extending this as long as needed.
I can also say that, so the way you communicate with they are called threat actors, the communication with the threat actors is actually through your cybersecurity team that communicates with them through the dark web. Literally, it is like a chat service in the dark web. There were times when we would put out a request for something, or we would try to negotiate, and their response was literally 4 words back, and it said, "Go get more money."
Can you talk about some of the things that surprised you during the process? Were there things you didn't expect? So it was their first time through it, and it was obviously something you hadn't experienced before. What were some of the things, and I put some examples down because those stood out to me. I was like, oh my gosh, they have tech support? Are you serious?
So as Mark just said, the tech support wasn't surprising. What really stood out to us is they considered themselves a business. They even flat out said, "We are a business just like you." Sorry, no, you're not. And so that really stood out to us. And as Mark just said, so we did end up getting a decryption tool to recover some files and everything. And when the decryption tool did not work and Mark was at a standstill, we got to go and ask the threat actor for why it wasn't working. So they had tech support to fix their broken stuff that they broke in the first place. So that was really surprising to us that they had that. And as soon as we read the ransom note, to jump back way to the beginning, all the data that was known on this organization. So pretty much what our cyber forensic team told us is, well, at least you're dealing with a reputable crime organization. Is really what it was. They had a full pretty much contract written out of, you do this, you pay this, we give you this, we give you the decryption, all laid out just like a complete business contract.
And we'll put your name out there to not touch, where
Yep.
nobody else should touch you.
Yep, us and any of our affiliates will not attack you again. And so it was full-on business contract. They treated it like a business deal from day one, and that's what it was. The time, and when they gave us the decryption tool, knowing that you press go, and I believe one of our servers took 5-7 days, 2 weeks, that we just pressed go and we just crossed our fingers, hoping we were going to get our data back on that one. And that's not to say we didn't have backups and we had all that. That was all there. So I guess we'll start at the beginning of this. Mark came into our organization from a hiatus when we had an internal IT. So we are very thankful that our internal IT decided to move on and we were able to bring Mark back on. So he was just newly into implementing field effects and all of that. Because without field effects or anything Mark just started to implement in our system, we wouldn't have known about the attack until we walked in and our employees were all looking at the ransom notes on their computers. So it was because of the fact that Mark stepped in and was in there starting to get everything in place. And unfortunately, it was just really bad timing that Mark was in, he was getting everything set up, we were doing all the right things, we were heading in the right direction, and they just got to us, a month too soon. And, just wasn't enough hours in the day for him to implement everything when we signed on board with Mark again. So having all of that stuff, having the 3 levels that Mark has always talked about, having something on site, having something in the cloud, and having something completely detached is 100% correct. What else? I'm sure there's lots of things.
So it turns out you can't call the police when you're
Yeah.
being held ransom, and you would think if somebody is, extorting your company, they would be helpful, but they're not in this situation. So you really do just rely on your cybersecurity, your legal team, your forensic, and Mark. Mark, endless nights with him and his crew on site doing everything they possibly could to get us up and running as quickly as possible. But yeah, so you can't call the police in this matter.
What about the FBI? What was their response? That was surprising, right?
So as we were about almost a month into this, I did receive a phone call from the FBI. They wanted to inform me that they found our information on a threat actor's computer from one of their affiliates. I had told them promptly, thank you, that would have been great a month ago. He's like, oh, what do you mean? I said, you got my name because we filled out all these reports and had to legally, claim all this. So you knew my information because there was already a claim. So unfortunately, the FBI did find out, and they did find their stuff on their servers from this threat actor. But unfortunately, it was way too late. The damage was already done. And then the follow-up and everything, he said, okay, I'm going to follow up. We're going to look into this. We want more information. We want this. I didn't hear from them a single time since then.
But really, the FBI won't get involved, especially with a company that is going to be looking at paying the ransom. The reason is they do feel that we are giving our money to a illegal organization, and they don't applaud that. So they really, when it comes to the FBI and looking at when paying the ransom, is they do kind of turn their heads.
They're not looking at we were looking at it from a standpoint of our 200 employees and our 200 families, and how do we get everything back up and going? Just because we were suffering what we were going through. The company suffered a great deal, but we do have 200 employees to think about and their families. And many that we have husbands and wives that work for us, so that was their entire income that was there. So we were thinking more than just ourselves and the company at the moment.
So next, let's talk about the recovery process. So we went through kind of the ground zero on day one, and some of the initial meetings and phone calls with the managers. So what did the recovery process look like from a leadership team? Kind of what was the most important thing to come online first, and maybe second and third? Maybe that's in tiers. Maybe is it employees, vendors, and then customers? That's just kind of from your business perspective, how did the recovery process go from business?
Yeah, actually, this was a really good question to put on here because I looked at them this afternoon and was like, where did we start? Looking at us is we actually, during the cyber attack, we were producing orders. I can say we were producing orders, but we were producing orders like we did back in 1999. It was paper, pencil, people running around with their heads cut off, us on our cell phones with a customer trying to get what the artwork was and sending texts back and forth. I mean, it was ridiculous. But with that, we were looking at, okay, how do we get paid? So top things that we looked at was getting our invoicing back up and going. We do have a system up for our invoicing, so it was okay, how do we connect and I'll speak to this, we have a proprietary software that runs our entire company. So it's not like I can go out and find that software somewhere else and take it and start. So it was super important we had our software. So we had to make sure those connections were made within our software to the accounting side so we could send the invoicing. We were also looking at the shipping side because since we were producing, we were manually shipping orders. They weren't necessarily going into our system, back into, so it was looking at which departments need to get up to get us going and to make the revenue, to start flowing in. Because at this point it was no revenue coming in. So we started with that, and one of the biggest things coming from our customer side is we store all of our customers' art files. We have millions, and our customers were struggling because we have their art files, so it wasn't necessarily easy for them just to go to somebody else because they didn't have their art files to go to somebody else. So we put it as a priority to figure out how do we get these art files back, and then gradually working with the team, and we have over 200 computers. So then it was really discussions with Mark and our internal IT team, going, okay, which computers do we bring up first? Because they took computers down and they had to reboot them all up. So
Yes,
Okay.
it is more than just Mark. We had the whole blue shirt team here. It was just one guy running around with 2 So literally, we had the entire AGC team in various buildings, rebuilding computers, rebuilding servers, rebuilding networks. All of it had to be stood up from scratch. It was a long and tenuous process.
Yeah. I also want to say, so we also did not have any Wi-Fi at this point. So all 3 of us, we were actually working out of one conference room from our laptops at that point in time. And for us to actually get service, we actually brought in a whole bunch of hotspots. So my mother at the time, my mother and my uncle had hotspots in Arizona. They shipped us overnight their hotspots, so we could get as many hotspots as we possibly could in our facility to throw the building to actually make what we were doing work.
Okay, so how about some lessons learned? Any recommendations to these fine business folks in the room? What would you recommend to them?
AGC. Feel the facts.
I'm gonna blush.
A good team.
A good team.
A good team to back you up.
Something that I will say is that we were told by numerous people that it's not when it's not if it's going to happen, it's when it's going to happen, and be prepared for what you've got to do for that, and having as much backup and everything as possible. So for us now is priorities, we're getting field effect on every single piece that we feel we need to have it on. Double authentication. And with discussing this, there's a few things, as I do want to clarify, is the threat actor got in, they actually provided us with the exact way how they got into our system. It is called a brute force attack. It's literally taking a path and literally just going through millions of passwords within seconds to get in. So it was not for us, it was not an email click. That's what we wanted to find out is we literally, I think all 3 of us really felt bad. Like we were like, okay, do we really want to know? Like this is gonna make our hearts break. But it was the double authentication, I think, is it. And then also having a full plan in place. So at this point in time, we are writing up a full plan of what happens, how do we communicate. I feel like we did darn well, but making sure that we have that all written and a plan in place.
Would you say you're thriving now?
I would
Wait,
say,
it's printed on postcards. Please say yes.
yes, we are
All brand new systems.
Yes, our technology absolutely is thriving. Will I say that our business is back to normal? It's not. Unfortunately, we're still having to answer to customers of, are we safe, are we not safe, and what happened, and still trying to gain that trust back into a lot of our customers. But we are thriving on our technology and our security, yes.
What do you think about cyber risk insurance? Maybe before the attack and afterwards?
Good question. Did not even realize we on the sales and business side. I was like, oh, cyber insurance, cool. What do we got? But I'll say we had $1 million policy. $1 million policy seems like a lot, right? Digging into our policy, I remember, I think it was like the 3rd or 4th day in, and so it had been like that Wednesday or Thursday. We were like, what does this all cover? Like, how are we going? So really understanding your insurance and what it covers and making sure it's enough. I will say $1 million is not enough, was not enough for us. Did it do us really well? Absolutely it did. But it didn't take care of our day-to-day business. It covered getting us up and going as a business. So understanding your insurance and reading through it.
Do you have any advice for folks that are planning cyber risk insurance or how to plan for a cyber event? Maybe into those risk analyses, or how do you feel better prepared now for a cyber event? Maybe that's a better question.
I was promised by the threat actors I wasn't gonna have. But, I mean, come on, I gotta trust the Russians, right? Good question. Okay, I'm stopping.
Okay, Mark, ask
Yeah, what was the question again?
Do you feel better prepared for an event now versus before?
Yeah,
And educated for sure, I'm sure.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that was the biggest thing is, you know, everyone always says it's insurance. None of us want insurance on anything, on cars, on anything. This is just another thing that you really should have, you know, and we're looking at it from the standpoint of 200 employees. If we didn't have the insurance we did, we definitely we wouldn't be sitting here today talking about this and being able to move forward. That's 100%. So insurance is 100% needed in any business, any size, and to make sure you truly do have it covered for yourself.
So another thing that we learned through this is, and I will clarify, we did not have a breach. We are very lucky. We did not have a breach. So one of the things that we have done internally, not only with our internal IT and Mark's team and everybody here in the blue, but we've also talked about, especially on Karen's side, and what a breach would have looked like and how do we prepare if something like that. So those pieces we have researched, we've talked to people, and we've gotten advice on how to manage that just in case.
You can.
So just so you know, the difference between the cyber attack and the breach is a breach actually, they gain access to your employee's personal identifying information. So that PII that was referenced earlier, we were very fortunate that they did not gain access to that. Once we recovered the data, we could see that they came close to a folder that would have had it, but they did not actually access it, which really put us in a different position so that we were able to recover from this event sooner than if that would have occurred.
Sure. So I'm just make a comment about the law enforcement angle. Law enforcement wants this stuff to be reported. The problem is they don't offer much help, right? The one practical thing is from a reporting perspective. So the FBI said in 2023 there's about $13 billion worth of cybercrime in the United States reported, and they figure only 20 or 25% is being reported. So that would put the figure up, say, $50 billion, right, to give you some ideas.
Sorry, I was looking.
There has been a move afoot to make it illegal to pay a ransom, and the train of thought is you're giving money to criminals, right? In a lot of cases, to an awful lot of this, not all of it, but an awful lot of this goes to Russia. North Korea is very active as well. Some of the people doing it might be in a basement here, but the infrastructure and the tools are often from overseas. So it's a bit of a naive perspective, though, and we heard the reasons why today, why that's naive. The federal government does that. Yes, they might throttle cybercrime, but they're not offering help to organizations like Dubow to put effective cyber security in place. It's not like they're going to subsidize you to do this. And there would be hundreds and thousands of organizations like Dubow going out of business. Like, it sounds like you were close. So there's 200 families that, were on the knife edge of losing their livelihoods, or a good chunk of their livelihoods. And that's why the movement has stalled. Okay, so there's been information coming forward, industry groups, chambers of commerce, that kind of thing, saying, no, you do that, it's too risky. Okay, so it doesn't sound like that legislation has legs. We might see more in terms of reporting. So, like if you were to lose your PII, there would have been a requirement to go to the state, right? Every state has a different construct, a privacy commissioner or something like that, where you would have to report the loss of privileged information. It could be medical, it could be employee information, and so on. So that is something you're going to see more and more of. Publicly traded companies have to report material losses, so those casinos I talked about, the dollar figures are known because they're obligated to report to the SEC, right? So one of the issues with cyber crime right now is we really don't have as much information as we would like. But organizations like our AGC and ourselves are working at the ground roots, helping organizations like yourself so that you can carry on. So it's a super interesting story, a rare one where you were in the process. The fact you were in the process helps, but unfortunately you weren't quite far enough along to stop it cold. But you're here today. I'm thankful for that.
Just peeking down on my sheet, I think there's a couple things that I was like, okay, something else that I would look at in your company is we have a mass voice communication to all of our staff, which is a mass communication and a texting tool. That was a savior for us to get to all of our employees on Sunday to let them know not to come in on Monday. And we communicated with them on a daily basis. So we didn't know how long this would last, so we were like, okay, tomorrow's another day, don't come in, see you in a couple days. And then I think it came to the following week and we were like, it's gonna be a week. So internally with that, we knew our employees were going to start struggling. And so we actually offered our employees up to 80 hours of borrowed PTO to be able to survive. I'm gonna cry because that was a big part of, I feel like, who we are as a company. It was a big push for us. We didn't know how we were gonna do it. Honestly, it was the three of us looking at each other going, we don't have a choice. We're gonna do it. We couldn't lose our employees, and we didn't want our employees to have to go find another job. So that was something we did, but also a communication to our customers. So we have constant contact out to our customers. And so we were immediately able to let our customers know about this, because we also wanted to make sure that any rumors were squashed before that went out. So.
Would you mind taking a few questions? If there's some from the audience?
Go for it.
Are you willing to share how much you had to pay?
I think we're gonna pass on that. A lot.
So you had mentioned that you sought attorney advice, legal advice. So was that provided to you, the referral for an attorney that specializes in cyber? Was that from a cyber insurance company?
Yes. Yes.
How many years have you carried cyber insurance on your policy?
Good question.
At least 5. At least 5.
The reason I ask is last year was the first year, and I've been in business for 33 years. The first year they said, do you guys want to get a cyber policy? And so we took one out last year. And we've had problems too, but thank you.
What's your policy?
Is
Cowbell Insurance.
not it.
No. Which is another sad piece, by the way. They're not.
Just insurance in general.
They're not
an
gonna keep us.
accident, a claim on anything, trying to do it, getting renewals, everything's through the road.
Do you know where the attack originated from?
Russia.
No, the criminal organization is known to be out of Russia.
I found it fascinating that it was a white boxed tool that some agency bought and just decided to deploy it. Because they weren't the authors of the software, they just bought the rights to use it. So it's basically cyber criminals as a service. You can, on the dark web, buy a subscription to a ransomware kit, and somebody else writes the software and deploys it, and they collect the money.
It's basically like being a franchisee. Like the McDonald's, you get a franchise, you buy your box of the software, you deploy it on your business, and then you get all the services up the stream as well.
It's a business enterprise for sure.
Yeah.
And I do want to say, so what we did pay the ransom, like I said, mentioned, but you actually paid in Bitcoin. So what you do is or crypto, thank you, so in crypto. So we had to then work through a crypto agency. They send a test amount to the threat actors. They have to give you a thumbs up that they got the test amount, and then you send them the real amount without having anything back yet. So when we sent it, we literally were crossing every single finger we possibly could.
So I think I know the answer to this, but I'll ask it because I think it's important that most people assume they're going to have backup and they'll just restore their backup and not pay the ransom. But my assumption is your backups were also in some way encrypted or not available to you. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, so that's what I was speaking with earlier. So we actually, the Wednesday before, our whole system was actually encrypted that Saturday. We found, once we were able to get into some of our stuff, we found where the threat actor got into our system. They promptly went in and they started to uninstall our security measures and everything. And so as they were doing that, they then took that morning 1.3 terabytes of data. Like you said, it wasn't anything pressing, but just throughout the whole entire process, that having that.
Backups were encrypted.
So yeah, so they did encrypt the backups.
So having.
Yep, but that's why the 1, 2, 3 that now we have learned and is ingrained in us is knowing that we are going to make sure we have the right backups, where the backups are, and having, example being on our HR side, Karen literally has a drive that she takes home with her every single Friday, or every single night. I don't know. Pretty much. Yes, a drive.
So the typical 3-2-1 policy is 3 copies of the data, 2 different types of media, at least 1 in the cloud. So in this case, this is off the domain. So the problem with the backups was the backups were on the same network and the same domain as the regular servers and everything else, so they were visible to the threat actor. Now they're on a separate system off the domain and it's replicated to the cloud also. So there's 3 copies of the data, 2 different media, and 1 in the cloud.
I'll just add a little texture to that. So that is often what the approach will be. So like City of Dallas, they had a big ransom asked them, they did not pay a ransom. So they had good backups, they could rebuild. That's super time consuming, right? You're not back up on day 1. So you're still gonna have a big impact, right? Weeks and weeks and weeks of impact. You're gonna restore your most important stuff first, and you're buying new hardware, you're doing all new stuff. It's a huge effort, right? So it's still, even with the good backups, it's a real ordeal, right? On the threat actor side, there's so we often don't have a lot of information, but I did a case study about the Irish healthcare system getting hacked 3 or 4 years ago. The entire healthcare system brought down by one mosquito. The entire country's healthcare system by a Russian cyber gang. That particular cyber crime gang got leaked to themselves, so we know a lot about them. They were about 200 people, run as a business, and in 2021 they made 180 million US, which in Russia is a lot more than it is here. Okay, and the affiliates, the people that can rent their stuff over the dark web, it's something like $200 US a week for a subscription. It's a subscription service. So you do get people, there are people in my own city, a person in my own city got arrested for attacking a whole bunch of stuff in Florida. He's going to be doing 25 years in jail. If you think of the drug distribution model, the folks overseas are the cartel leaders, right? And they're not getting touched. It's the ground level people, the street dealers that are getting arrested, right? And then crypto is what made this all possible, right? 20 years ago when I started, yes, we were concerned about you losing your intellectual property and so on, but crypto, Bitcoin, anonymous payments is what really made this all possible, right? Because it was too hard before. Now, with Bitcoin, it's just, it has made it really, really easy. And it's not quite as anonymous as the cyber criminals think, but it's still pretty anonymous. And you were doing your own negotiation, it sounds like, or your own communications. Often the cyber insurer will there are negotiators who specialize in this. If you can believe it. So it's there's a whole ecosystem and it's bonkers. And hopefully no one else here suffers from it.
So you had mentioned that you had like 200 computers and other devices. I'm assuming you have specialized equipment, lasers and printers that have their own technology in. Did they go and encrypt those as well? And if so, did you have to go back to that vendor and have them completely rebuild those?
Mark can speak maybe to a little of this as well, but most of our systems had to be completely, well, all of our systems were completely wiped. So yes, we had to go back to any of our specialty vendors and everything and work with them and say, you know what, even if their stuff wasn't affected and truly locked, the whole entire computer in one way or another was infected. So we had to wipe all 200 computers and servers and all the equipment in the machines. And so, yes, everything had to be gone through one at a time, reloading, different versions, different years, caused different, you know, so it wasn't that we could just take everything and put it back. I mean, even the computer side was probably, you know, I shouldn't say easier side because that was Mark's, but dealing with the different versions of software, even stuff from 5-6 years ago, the vendors are like, well, we don't really support that. I'm like, well, but I need that. I can't just throw this equipment away now. I need to get back up and going. So we had a lot of really good partners and vendors working with us to get us back up and going through that. But yes, pretty much everything had to be switched and changed over.
And I'll also say, so from the time that we found out about the attack that Saturday morning on October 5th, it was October 12th that they actually agreed to our, the deal that we put out there. It was pretty much immediately that the money transfer was happening and that they gave us the decryption tool. The piece is that a lot of people would say is, okay, you got it, now you're up and running. That was not the fact. So we were starting to get back up and running. I'd say we had the majority of our staff back within 2 weeks after that. But it still took until, I mean, not even too long ago. I mean, we were still dealing with it a month ago just to make sure the other pieces of equipment are up.
Yeah, I wanted to mention one more thing about the recovery process. So to encrypt, I'm not sure the tooling that they have, but it was certainly the morning of October 5th when a mass encryption happened, and it was probably pretty quick. To decrypt is not that way. So once the ransom was paid, once the tool comes over, that was 10 or 12 days in, whatever it was. So here's your tool. Okay, here's the instructions in broken English. Okay, let's start with some of the systems. And so one system at a time, decrypt. And I don't know how long it's going to take. There wasn't instructions. If it's a 500 gigabyte drive, does it take 5 minutes or 10 minutes or an hour? It just depends. So learning along the way about the decryption process takes a while. So we could probably decrypt 4 or 5 systems at a time to get the data extracted out of there. But the one big ART volume was 24 terabytes. How long does that take? I don't know. It took 2 weeks, so we were definitely all on the edge of the seat. I hope to God this data comes back because that's obviously important data. So the other issue was it was encrypted twice. So in this case, we used VMware for the server level. The VMDK files, all of the VMDKs were encrypted. Fine, that's done. Now you start over, log into Windows, decrypt Windows. All of the system files there, so it's encrypted twice. So it takes a tremendous effort. And again, you start it, and there's no progress bar, there's no %2345. You just wait and hope. So I would say in that case, the reputation was key because we wanted to know, if we do this, all this effort, all this money, all this time, is it going to work? The reputation was good, so pretty good odds, and it did work. We successfully recovered all of the data. Luckily, that was a safer. But I mean, there's no, we say no tech support, but it's like I want to talk about the 3 questions. You can only ask 3 questions at a time. So certainly I have curiosity about how does this thing work? Can you tell me? So I've got 5 questions I want to ask the threat actors, and the recommendation was you ask 3 questions. The first one they'll probably answer. The second one they might. The third one they might not, but don't ask 4 or 5 because they're going to ignore the rest of those. So you choose very carefully what the most important things are that you want to know. And then you submit it, and then you wait. And sometimes it's the next day or 2 days later. And so there's a lot of stuff happening, rebuilding systems, waiting for a response. But our activities depend on the response, so we've got to kind of pivot and work around that as best we can. So it was a learning for everyone.
So just to go back to your comment about was the equipment actually compromising this, and it was interesting now they actually put the notes on all of our equipment and all of our computers. Because in the beginning, we did not want to notify our staff of what was happening because, well, we just didn't know the full extent of what was happening. And it was one of our employees who turned on a machine and said, oh, I see a note. And here, the company or the organization found a way of putting that ransom note on every single piece of equipment we had. And so we were not able to pick a time and a place to tell our staff. Anybody who was in-house could see it.
Other questions? Chris, anyone out there?
Pretty quiet. Oh, there's one over here.
It's one of our own. He's a double agent.
Is this a loaded question?
It kind of is. It kind of is.
All right, so actually this is more for you guys. So who here has full coverage on your car, on your vehicle, right? A couple of us? Yes. That means you can drive reckless, right? Because insurance takes care of it. I think this is a prime example. I hear this all the time. I've got cyber risk insurance, I don't really care. For whatever reason, there is a mentality shift between the terrible experience, I apologize if there's anybody here in the insurance realm, but it sucks. If you've ever had to claim anything on your car, it sucks. Going through this process, it sucks. It's not, there's nothing different about it. They are trying to get out of paying as much as they can on this side of the fence, as much as they are when you get a fender bender or somebody smashes into your vehicle. So pay attention to not just like, yeah, we've got cyber risk insurance, that's great. But if you don't have the layers in place, just like you hopefully don't drive your nice vehicles risky, even though you've got insurance. It's a really important piece. And this experience, I'm sorry you guys had to go through that, but hopefully for you guys, like this, there's so much value in hearing somebody who's been on the other side of that instead of, yeah, insurance will take care of it. Because it doesn't. Even if you had higher insurance and it, you had a $10 million coverage, you still wouldn't want to go through any of this. It sucks. The whole thing is terrible. And you nailed, for me, the biggest piece of this is your staff, right? It's such, you wouldn't want to put this on anybody's family.
No, I wouldn't. The other thing is every morning we have a meeting with this entire team, with our entire cyber team. And every morning the first thing I would say is, okay, we lost another $200,000 in revenue. Help us. We lost another $200,000 in revenue. Help us. Every morning, that was my first words to this team, was saying, what are we doing? I literally am losing and losing. And then I said, by the time I pay this ransom, I'm also down all of this revenue. And just to give you an idea, and this is a little bit, we lost about $2.5 million in revenue.
Any other questions, folks?
Thank you for sharing your story. It makes me want to cry.
Us too. Me too.
All right, let's get
We're
these-
here.
let's get these- All right, just a few closing remarks. Again, I very much appreciate everyone being here. We thought this was a great story to tell. We wanted to share it because this information doesn't belong in our brains. We want to share it with the community and help you understand kind of what the risks are. And it happens right here in St. Cloud, the local families and local businesses. We are offering, again, a special on dark web scan. If you would like a free dark web scan, Greg and Chris can pull it up right there. We can search by your company's domain name or just an email address and put out if any information is leaked. That's free, no obligation, no charge. You'll get it right here today in your email. So just you can pop into one of those guys and ask them. We do these seminars several times a year. We're going to keep them free. We're going to keep them, again, with appetizers and beverages as much as we can. And we think the information is great, and we want to be your go-to when it comes to cyber education or working on projects, infrastructure, and cybersecurity. So again, thank you for coming. Let us know if you have any questions on the way out. Talk to the Dubow team, talk to Patrick. Again, please drive safely.